Phil Kemper, you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can.
All right. This is a citation that was issued on January 10th of this year on US 131 there in Wayland Township. Said too fast for conditions involving an accident. You're here, ma'am, on this citation to do one of three things. First is you could admit responsibility to the citation, or two, admit responsibility, but you'd like to provide some sort of explanation to court as to how or why this happened. Or three, you wish to contest this citation. In other words, fight this ticket at what we call informal hearing. What were you looking to do?
I want the hearing, please. I deny responsibility.
All right. Then the first thing I do is swear you both in. You want to go ahead and raise your right hands. You swear or affirm any testimony that you give here today would be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, it makes a lot more sense for me to start with the deputy. He has the burden to establish to me why you were issued a citation in the first place, but then after that, you'll have an opportunity to either ask questions or testify on your own behalf, all right?
Yes. Can I just state something for the record first before we begin?
Sure.
The only thing that I wanted to state is that I did previously request an adjournment of this because I did suffer a head injury and I am written off from work because of my head injury by a concussion doctor at the neurology center at Bronson. I'm not supposed to be practicing law, so I don't feel that I should have to go forward. But I was told by the court we could not adjourn this unless I wanted to have a formal hearing and skip this process. So
That is correct.
I
If you
wanted.
don't want to go forward today, you can ask for formal hearing. That'll get reset and they'd be compliant with you asking for a date considerably farther out. But for informal hearing, we don't move dates, either by officer or by defendant.
Yeah, I just wanted the court to be aware that my processing right now is slower. And so I might take a moment to ask questions and things.
That's fine. We have time.
Thank you.
All right. And so with that, Deputy, you want to pick up the narrative somewhere where it makes sense and explain the issuing of this citation?
Yes, sir. So on January 10th, 2025, shortly after 5:04 p.m., we were dispatched to southbound US 131, just south of the 6-1 mile marker on ramp, for one vehicle crashed into the ditch. Upon arriving on scene, we found a single vehicle identified as a 2016 Chevy, red in color, with the attached Michigan license plate of Edward Lincoln David 430, into the right-hand shoulder of southbound US 131. Through investigation, I found that the vehicle was traveling southbound when it had lost control, went into the ditch, and did sustain damage. I did issue the driver and the only occupant of the vehicle identified as Angelique, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Angelique Camfield Kuiper, the citation for the violation of the basic speed law for driving too fast. I did issue her citation SD 33604.
All right. And Ms. Camfield Kuiper, what is it you wish to tell me?
I would like to cross-examine the deputy, please.
Okay.
And Deputy Earl, how long have you been a deputy for the Allegan County Sheriff's Department?
I've been here for 2.5 years.
Any prior law enforcement experience?
Yes, ma'am. I've been an officer prior to that for a separate agency for a year and a half.
When did you graduate the academy?
I believe it was 2020.
And what?
Ms. Camfield Kuiper, how would this be relevant to your citation?
I think I have the right to ask him his background and experience to determine whether I was going too fast when there was no personal observation.
Then let me just put something on record here. This is not a speeding ticket. It's not accusing you of speeding. You can get this ticket going 10 miles an hour. What it is you have a duty to maintain your vehicle on the roadway. Weather conditions and road conditions are not a legal defense to this ticket. Essentially, the only legal defense to this ticket is I didn't slide off the road. So I'll let you proceed, but what the officer's experience is not relevant. He's not making a judgment call that you were too fast for conditions.
Yeah.
He's simply observing that your car left the roadway. That is the only element to this citation.
Actually, Your Honor, I looked up the statute and the statute says exactly, it is under the speeding statute under 257-627 parens 1 that I.
Yes, ma'am, but like I said, if you're going 10 miles an hour and you slide off the roadway, you will still get this citation. It is not accusing you of speeding. It is accusing you of going too fast for conditions. The prima facie evidence of that is that you left the roadway. But you can continue.
I respectfully disagree with the court on that. Deputy, did you personally observe any of my driving that day?
No.
Did you speak to anybody who personally observed my driving that day?
No, ma'am.
Can you tell me what the weather conditions were that day?
I believe they were cloudy with snow.
Can you tell me where you were when you were dispatched to the scene?
I believe I was in Wayland when I was dispatched to this scene.
Do you know what the distance was that you were away from where my car was?
I do not.
Do you know how long it took you to get there?
I do not.
Do you know if the snow began earlier in the morning and was accumulating on the highway?
I do not recall.
Do you know if it was icy in addition to being snowy that day?
I do not recall.
Did you have an opportunity to review your accident report prior to testifying today?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall on your accident report that you wrote there was no ambulance at the scene?
I do not recall.
Would you refresh your recollection if you saw your accident report?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have that with you, sir?
Yes, I can pull it up.
Could you take a look at that, please, and tell me whether you marked an ambulance was present or not?
Ma'am, can you tell me whether or not it would be relevant whether or not there was an ambulance there?
Yes, Your Honor. If the deputy can't recall what the weather was, how long it took him to get there, whether it was icy in addition to snowing, and there are errors in the traffic report, it calls into question the veracity in his recollection with respect to that day.
Okay, but ma'am, the relevant sentence would be your testimony. Whether, are you denying that you had an accident and left the roadway?
No, Your Honor, but I have
That's
other.
the only pertinent question.
I have other information to present to the court.
Okay, why don't we present it in the form of testimony as opposed to cross-examination, and I'll determine whether or not this line of inquiry is relevant to a civil infraction, ma'am.
Okay. I guess I don't.
Ma'am, let me put it another way. Road conditions and weather conditions are not a legal defense to this ticket. You have a ticket that says your car left the roadway. Do you have any information to present that your car didn't leave the roadway?
No, the ticket, the statutory section says, did I operate at a careful and prudent speed, not greater than nor less than what's reasonable and proper, having due regard to the traffic surface width of the highway and any other condition existing.
I'm infinitely familiar with the statute. Here's the issue. The testimony is that your car left the roadway. That is the prima facie evidence that you were not traveling at a speed conducive to the weather conditions and the road conditions. Ma'am, you can make that argument, but what I need to hear before I make a ruling, is we're getting way far afield of the information I need, is whether or not your car, you had an accident where you left the roadway that day. I have testimony that you did. If you would like to provide testimony that that didn't happen, that would be relevant for this citation.
So none of the road or weather conditions are relevant to this actual.
No, ma'am. I sit here all winter, every year, getting this citation. If you have a slide off, even a one-car slide off, you will get this citation. We cannot give a ticket to the road for being icy or to the weather for being snowy. We live in Michigan.
But
people were driving all day long on 131 and not having accidents, but you had an accident. That's why you have this citation. The defense to this citation would be, I didn't have an accident.
Well, I
You
don't.
cannot blame it on the road or blame it on the weather. That is not an option for me to not find you responsible. I would still find you responsible regardless of the weather or regardless of the road conditions. You always theoretically could have been driving differently and not had an accident.
And the court is predisposed to a decision on these tickets.
Well, no, ma'am, because I would be willing to hear you say that didn't happen. I didn't slide off the road. But you're not suggesting that or testifying that. You just are going in circles about road conditions and weather conditions. So what I'm saying is I give you an opportunity right now to present to me relevant testimony to my decision of whether or not you had a slide off that day.
The relevant testimony, Your Honor, is that I was traveling at a careful and prudent speed. And
no, you weren't, ma'am. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had an accident. That is the definition of careful and prudent, right?
I disagree with the court.
Okay.
If I may specify, I would appreciate doing so.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I work in Grand Rapids and I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I was on my way home from work. You'll have to forgive me. This when I talk about this accident, it's very traumatic and it makes me extremely upset. I haven't had a citation in over 20 plus years. My last ticket was when I was in my 20s on my way to law school.
Ma'am, again, that's a relevancy issue. It would be unfair of me if I looked up your record and made decisions on this case based upon whether you did or did not have tickets. All I have to do is decide on January 10th of this year around 5:04 p.m. did you slide off a 131 or not? That's the only thing I have to decide. I already have evidence provided from the deputy that that did in fact happen. This is your opportunity to present evidence to me that it didn't happen.
Well, I was driving at a careful and prudent speed, which is part of the statute. And just that the fact that my car went off the roadway does not mean that I was not. There were 22 accidents between mine and the hospital the EMTs were taking me to. They told me that. And it wasn't that every single person was driving too fast for conditions. I had just driven. So when I left my office, it took me 20 minutes to clear off my car. I'm very, very careful to make sure that my lights aren't covered. There's no snow on my roof or anywhere else. My plate is visible. I'm very careful with that. And I had just driven through an accident. I don't have a clear recollection, but it was either just at the south end of the S curve or towards Caledonia. And I was being very cautious because I was trying to get home safely and have a weekend with my daughter because her sister was out of the state at a soccer tournament and I just wanted some time with her. And I remember that I texted over the Bluetooth my staff at the office and I said, be very careful, the roads are bad. And then I called my daughter over the Bluetooth and said, honey, I'm gonna be late because the roads are really, really bad and I just passed an accident and I'm taking my time.
Ma'am, I'm gonna caution you. Did you just testify that while you were driving, you texted?
Over the Bluetooth, it's the voice to text.
Oh.
I do not hold my phone while I'm driving ever, and I always
Oh.
wear my seatbelt. So I let them know that I was gonna be later because I was taking my time and being cautious. When I got into Allegan County, the roads were worse and the visibility was lower. And I'm hesitant always to change lanes in that weather because in Allegan County in particular, the road condition's really bad at clearing the roads. I've driven in this state. I've lived in this state my whole life. I know how to drive in the winter and to be cautious. And I've also, I was hit on I-94 in 2021. I was
Ma'am, you are telling a very long and involved story that is irrelevant to the decision I have to make today.
I'm trying to explain what happened.
How is anything that you've told me so far going to explain whether or not you left the roadway or not?
Because it tells you how it happened. I was being careful.
No, it doesn't, ma'am.
Driving.
The fact that you were in an accident in the past on a different road has no bearing on what's happening here.
It does, because I was rear-ended and slammed into the vehicle in front of me, and it caused me trauma. And there was somebody that was coming up really fast behind me, probably a truck, I can't remember. Because I get really nervous then when they're behind me so fast because I've already been hit. So I slowed even more and wanted to put my indicator on and checked my mirror to make sure it was clear. And I started to merge over so I would get out of that person's way. And then the slush was pretty deep. It was about maybe 3 or 4 inches of slush between the lanes, and it caught my tires. And there wasn't anything that I could do. I wasn't driving too fast. I was trying to slow down even more and get out of that person's way. Very careful on the road.
Anything further you wish to tell me, ma'am?
Just that I don't think a preponderance of the evidence demonstrates just because I was off the road that means I wasn't driving carefully and prudently. I was even informing people how bad it was and saying to be careful.
Okay, ma'am, so for purposes of informal hearing, I would find that the deputy has met their burden and that you are responsible on this citation. Now, because you had a contested hearing, you do have a right to say, I don't agree with what just happened there. I want to take this to formal hearing. Formal hearing is in front of the district court judges. It involves the prosecutor's office. But to get to formal hearing, you must do 2 things. First is you must ask for a formal hearing within 7 days of today's date. That window of opportunity to contest this further closes after 7 days. And 2, you must come in and post a cash bond in the same amount as the fine to guarantee your appearance at formal hearing. Do you understand your rights on appeal?
Yes, I don't know how much the ticket is.
I can tell you that. It's either 110 or 135, depending on whether or not they put the accident on there. $135. So if you come in and post that as bond, and then request that formal hearing within 7 days, you'd get another bite at the apple. I will tell you the problem that formal hearing will also be that road conditions and weather conditions are not a legal defense to this ticket, but you're free to exercise your rights. But we're all set for what we need to do here today. I'm going to go ahead and release parties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.